It's up in there.
Okay, so ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Yeah, we'll be done today. Then we have a lot of time to start. So, we were talking about the endocrine system, the glands and the hormones. So, in last class, I talked about the pituitary gland and pituitary hormones, right? Talked about how hypothalamus controls the pituitary gland and how the pituitary gland controls the other glands by negative feedback mechanism. Remember? Okay. Then we talked about the thyroid gland, which is located here, the lower part of the neck. And we also talked about the thyroid hormones, T3, T4, calcitonin, right? And how the thyroid hormone is produced with the help of iodine, right? Iodine and tyrosine, that amino acid, they join together to form the hormones, T3 and T4. And T3 and T4 increase the metabolic activities of the body. That's why in hyperthyroidism, the metabolism is high, right, in the body. So the person always like feels restless. Heart rate is high, right? Blood pressure is high, body temperature is high, and gradually the person loses the body weight, fats, right? Because of high metabolic activities. So irritability, sleeplessness, those are the symptoms of hyperthyroidism. We have also talked about the goiter, enlargement of thyroid gland. Remember that? We talked about the Graves' disease. So today, first, we'll talk about the parathyroid glands. Parathyroid glands are attached to the back of the thyroid, dorsal surface or posterior surface of the thyroid. And how many? Anybody remember?
48.
48, very good. So this is thyroid. If you look in the back of the thyroid, you have small glands. These are the parathyroid. Parathyroid glands produce one hormone that is called parathyroid hormone or PTH, also called parathormone. Same thing, parathormone. Parathyroid hormone or PTH or parathormone. This hormone is very important. Why? Because this hormone increases blood calcium. So if someone gets hypocalcemia, hypocalcemia is the condition where the blood calcium is low. Hypo means low, you know that. Hypocalcemia is the condition where the calcium in the blood is low. Okay? So if that happens, hypocalcemia occurs in the body, then parathyroid gland will release more parathyroid hormone that will increase or elevate the calcium in the blood. Now the question is, how parathyroid hormone increases the calcium? Parathyroid hormone works on three structures. It works on three structures or organs. Parathyroid hormone works on bones, number one. Number two, kidneys. And number three, intestine. Now, by working on those three organs or structures, parathyroid hormone increases the calcium in the blood. How? What it does on the bones? Parathyroid hormone stimulates the osteoclasts. Have you heard this name?
Yeah.
One type of bone cells, right? Osteoclasts. They are what? Giant, big. And they love to destroy the matrix. Remember that? Okay. So, when parathyroid hormone will be released, parathyroid hormone will stimulate or activate the osteoclasts, those bone cells. Okay? So, they will be hyperactive and will start to break the matrix. Make sense? And matrix contains huge amount of what? Calcium. Bone matrix has a lot of what? Calcium in it. So the parathyroid hormone will stimulate the osteoclasts. So osteoclastic activity will be increased. That will destroy the matrix, destroy the bone matrix, and that will release calcium from the matrix. When the calcium comes out from the bone matrix, it enters into the blood. So calcium comes out from the bone and enters into the blood. So blood calcium will go up. That's how it increases the calcium by working on the bones. On kidneys, very simple. You tell me, if in your body the calcium concentration is low in the blood, kidney should excrete more calcium or preserve it? Preserve it. Make sense? That is called reabsorption. Preserving. So, on kidneys, parathyroid hormone will increase reabsorption. That means will preserve. Of calcium, will retain the calcium in the body, will not let it get out through the urine. Is it clear? Will not let it get out through the kidney. Is it clear? Okay. So that is another way parathyroid hormone will increase the calcium. On intestine, parathyroid hormone works through vitamin D. It doesn't work directly. Parathyroid hormone, PTH, increases vitamin D production or synthesis. Vitamin D synthesis. And this vitamin D works on the intestine and helps the reabsorption of calcium from the food you eat. Very easy, just think this way. Vitamin D is important to absorb the calcium from the food you eat. So if vitamin D production can be increased, then absorption of calcium from the food in the intestine will be increased. So the blood calcium will go up. So that's how parathyroid hormone works on the intestine, not directly, via vitamin D. And vitamin D increases the absorption of calcium from the food in the intestine. So those three actions together increase the blood calcium. Make sense? Acting on the bones, acting on the kidneys, acting on the intestine through vitamin D. Okay. Here you see the back of the thyroid, so you can see the parathyroid gland and histology of the parathyroid gland. You see under the microscope the tissue inside the gland. You will see the cells. Two types of cells are present: chief cells, and chief cells secrete the parathyroid hormone. So that's the important one. chief cells are the cells that secrete the parathyroid hormone. Here in this picture, you can see I have explained already. If the blood calcium goes down, parathyroid hormone will be released from the glands, and that will work on the bones, work on the kidneys, work on the intestine. Make sense? Hyperparathyroidism and hypoparathyroidism. If the parathyroid gland works more, you tell me, if parathyroid hormone is secreted more, right? Then what will happen? Blood calcium will increase, will be increased, right? Because parathyroid hormone increases the calcium in the blood. We know that. So, if in your blood the calcium concentration is high, that can cause problems. That is called hypercalcemia. Hyper. If it is low, that is called what? Hypocalcemia. I have already mentioned. So, hypercalcemia will occur if parathyroid hormone is released more. Make sense? And hypocalcemia, blood calcium will go down if parathyroid hormone is less. Make sense? So hyperparathyroidism increases the calcium in the blood. Hypoparathyroidism lowers the calcium in the blood. Both are good or bad? Bad.
How do you avoid the first, how do you avoid that hyper? How do you, because it causes kidney stones.
Yes.
Anti-kidney stones. How do you
Yes.
avoid that?
If your body homeostasis is lost, negative feedback doesn't work properly, it will not be able to stop the parathyroid hormone secretion. If pituitary gland works more, that will continuously send signal to the parathyroid gland to release more parathyroid hormone. If a tumor occurs, okay, initially the tumor, that means increase the number of cells in that gland, right? So the parathyroid hormone secretion could be more.
How does that happen though?
What?
How does it just keep producing it, like uncontrollably like that? How does that happen?
All the glands in your body are continuously producing hormones, okay?
Okay.
Now the question is, why increased production? All the glands, the function of the glands is production of hormone. Function is production of hormone. So if it gets more signal from the brain, from the hypothalamus, from the pituitary, those are the centers, right? Master gland and the control centers. So if they send more signal to the gland, then the glands will produce and secrete more hormones, right? And that can occur. One reason is tumor, pituitary tumor or parathyroid tumor itself.
Okay.
So that.
My aunt had a tumor though. She just drank coffee all the time.
Yeah, some chemicals can stimulate the glands. Yes.
Okay.
So, but you cannot tell that coffee is doing that. But definitely, some medicines can, stimulate the glands to produce more hormone, secrete more hormone. Certain food can do that. But those are physiological. If any food or coffee does it, you can stop it. It's not a clinical condition. It's like
Right.
Okay, so if the calcium concentration is high for a long time in your blood, okay, hypercalcemia, that can cause the bones, deformation of the bones. Why? What do you think? Hyperparathyroidism will make the bones weak. Why? I have already explained. Very good. Osteoclastic activity will be high, right? Osteoclast do what? Break the matrix. And matrix is the hard part of the bone. Most hard part is the matrix. Okay? So if osteoclastic activity is high, it will always break the matrix and make the bones weak and fragile. Will easily break. So that is not good. Increased calcium or hypercalcemia can depress the nervous system, which is the main control system of the body, right? So if your nervous system is depressed, that will make all other systems depressed. Make sense? Because it is the control center. And kidney stones. You know, if in your blood the calcium is high, blood is always going to the kidneys, right? Filtration occurs in the kidneys. So the accumulation of calcium will occur in the kidney. The calcium will deposit inside the kidney. Make sense? So that will slowly make kidney stones due to accumulation of calcium. So those are the common problems in hyperparathyroidism. Hypoparathyroidism, if the calcium is low, calcium is a very important mineral in the body, extremely important. That's why I said that in last class probably that calcium concentration must be what? Between 9 to 11 milligram. Did I mention that? Yes. 9 to 11 milligram. If I did not, just write it down. In your blood, the calcium concentration must be maintained between 9 to 11 milligram per deciliter of blood. Deciliter means what? 1/10 of a liter. That means how many milliliter? 1 liter is how many milliliter? 1000. And 1/10 of that? 100, right? Okay. So yes, 100. So 1 deciliter means 1/10 of a liter. That means 100 milliliter. Make sense? So 100 milliliter of blood you must have 9 to 11 milligram. If it is below 9, that is called hypocalcemia. If it is above 11, that is hypercalcemia. I have already talked about hypercalcemia that can depress the nervous system, that can produce kidney stones, and that can also do what? If calcium is high, your bones can be deformed, softening of the bone, weakening of the bone. Hypocalcemia will cause tetany, convulsion, paralysis of the respiratory muscles. And if the respiratory muscle paralysis occur, the person will not be able to breathe, right? So that can even cause what? Death due to the paralysis of the respiratory muscles. So now you understand that calcium is a very important mineral in the body. Hyper is above 11, hypo is below 9 milligrams. So it must be maintained between 9 to 11 milligrams, okay, in the blood. If it goes below 9, PTH will be released more. If it goes up, then calcitonin. You remember one thyroid hormone called calcitonin that lowers the calcium. So remember, PTH increases the calcium in the blood. We already know that. And in last class, I mentioned calcitonin. It lowers the calcium in the blood. Now you tell me, if the calcium concentration in your blood goes above 11, then which one should be released? Calcitonin to decrease it. Is it clear? If the calcium concentration goes below 9, this one should be released to increase. Okay? So that's how the calcium, these two hormones control or regulate the calcium in the blood. If I ask you which two hormones regulate the calcium in the blood, these are the hormones. Also you need to know from which gland, which one comes, parathyroid hormone. Its name is telling you from the parathyroid gland. Parathyroid glands parathyroid hormone, and calcitonin, remember, comes from thyroid, T3, T4 and calcitonin. Okay, so these two hormones are coming from two different glands. Okay, so now we'll talk about the adrenal glands. Sitting on what? Anybody? Kidneys. Okay, that's why adrenal glands are how many? Two. Sitting on the kidneys, on the upper pole of the kidney, like the crown of the kidney. So this is the kidney and this is the adrenal gland. Adrenal gland is also called suprarenal gland. Makes sense? Renal means kidney, supra means above, right? So sitting above on the kidney. Adrenal gland, if you cut the adrenal gland and see inside, it has two parts, outer part and inner part. This outer part is called the cortex, adrenal cortex, and inner part is called what? Medulla. Adrenal cortex, adrenal medulla. Make sense? Okay. Outer part, which is the adrenal cortex, has three layers in it. So cortex has how many layers? Three. Like this. 1, 2, 3. So 3 layers in the cortex. And 3 layers work as 3 different glands. Make sense? 3 layers work as 3 separate glands. That's why adrenal cortex is called 3 glands in 1. Make sense? So, what are those 3 layers? Outermost layer is called zona glomerulosa. Zona glomerulosa. You need to know the names. Middle layer is called zona fasciculata. And innermost layer of the cortex is called zona reticularis. So those are 3 layers in the cortex. Zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata and zona reticularis. 3 layers produce 3 different types of hormones. That's why they are considered as 3 glands. Because they produce what? 3 different types of hormones. Totally different from each other. Make sense? So zona glomerulosa produces, this layer produces the outermost. The hormones, those are called mineralocorticoids. Mineralocorticoids. From its name, you tell me. Mineralocorticoids, these hormones, regulate what? Minerals in the body. Make sense? Like sodium, potassium, right? Those are the minerals. The most important mineralocorticoid is called aldosterone. Aldosterone. It regulates sodium and potassium. Those are important minerals. Zona fasciculata, this middle layer produces the hormones called glucocorticoids. Glucocorticoids, when glucocorticoids were first identified, the scientists, they have found that its action is strong on the glucose metabolism, on glucose, okay, metabolism. But later they found that glucocorticoids have very strong anti-inflammatory action. Strong what? Anti-inflammatory. Stops inflammation. Make sense? Have you seen the ointment or drop called hydrocortisone? Commonly we use, right? Hydrocortisone. Either in conjunctivitis we put the drop, right? If you get an inflammation, you use that hydrocortisone, like 1%, 2%, right? And very strong anti-inflammatory. Quickly inflammation goes away. That is only 1 or 2%, right? So you can just think that how strong anti-inflammatory action. If you use 50%, that will really work very fast, right? So that is glucocorticoid. The main glucocorticoid is called cortisol. Cortisol. Have you heard the name hydrocortisone? You have seen, right? The ointment or drop, hydrocortisone. Prednisone. Have you heard that? Prednisone is a steroid. Okay. Very often we use in chronic infection. So that is also cortisol. All those come from cortisol. This hormone. Hydrocortisone, prednisolone, all those come from this. Zona reticularis, this layer produces sex hormones. Okay? Estrogen, testosterone, yes.
What is the
Corticoids, yes.
You said it is anti-inflammatory?
Yes.
But cortisol causes inflammation.
No. Cortisol prevents inflammation.
But cortisol is released when you're stressed.
Yeah.
I thought that made you inflamed.
Released in stress, that's right.
Right.
Released in
But
stress.
doesn't that cause inflammation?
No, this hormone cortisol and the derivatives of cortisol have a strong anti-inflammatory. We'll check it later, but that's the hormone. Okay. Could be a medicine that comes from that different. We'll check that. But cortisol and its derivatives, they are anti-inflammatory. We can check it later. Okay.
I'm gonna look at it.
Yeah, we'll check it. Sex hormones.
Talking about cortisol or
Cortisone. Cortisone is also the medicine. Okay, cortisone, hydrocortisone, prednisolone. We'll check it.
No, you're right. I don't know.
It increases the
Sugar, yeah, that I mentioned metabolism of sugar. That's why it is called glucocorticoid, glucose, sugar, right? Increases the sugar.
What's released then that causes inflammation? What am I thinking of?
Inflammation is histamine, prostaglandin, those are the chemicals. Because histamine is the main one that causes inflammation, okay? Have you heard histamine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it causes inflammation. Okay, so glucocorticoid, as I mentioned, that it works on glucose metabolism, increases the glucose in the blood, that is one. But later we found that it has a strong anti-inflammatory, that is more prominent action, and we use that more for that purpose. Sex hormones, zona reticularis, okay? So these are 3 layers of what? Adrenal cortex and their hormones. Now adrenal medulla, the inner part. adrenal medulla produces adrenaline, which is also called epinephrine, and noradrenaline, which is also called norepinephrine. Norepinephrine. So epinephrine and norepinephrine, these two hormones come from the adrenal medulla. And these two hormones work same way, they have similar actions. Increases sympathetic activation in the body. You all know, I mentioned before, sympathetic activation, if sympathetic nervous system works more in the body, what will happen? That is called what? Fight or flight response. Have you heard that? Okay, so your heart rate will increase. If you see something is scary, right? Sympathetic activation occurs. Adrenaline is released. If you see something, suspense, drama, lot of suspense, adrenaline is released, right? That activates the sympathetic nervous system. Okay? So your heart rate increases, your blood pressure goes up, right? Your muscle tone increases, respiratory rate increases. So all those are the results of sympathetic activation. Result of adrenaline or adrenal. That will increase the sympathetic activity, okay? Will make those changes in the body. So, very important hormone to feel excited. Okay? So, those are the hormones of the adrenal glands. So, now you know that adrenal glands are very important glands in the body. Now, prolonged hyperadrenalism. Causes Cushing syndrome, and hypoadrenalism causes a condition that is called Addison's disease. So, hyperfunction of adrenal cortex will do what? Cause Cushing syndrome. And hypofunction of adrenal cortex, if the secretion is less for a long time, that will cause Addison's disease. Cushing syndrome, the symptoms syndrome, the main symptoms are, now you tell me, if adrenal cortex secretes adrenal, glucocorticoids more, then glucose in the blood will be high. Make sense? So that is one symptoms. Increase glucose in the blood. Hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia. That's the increased glucose in the blood. Moon face. This is interesting. The person's face will get round, more like moon. Okay? Because of accumulation of fat. You see, this is before the same person, this is after. Okay? So the face becomes more round due to fat. That is called moon face. Another is called buffalo hump. In the back of the neck, shoulder, and back part of the body, lot of fat will accumulate. Okay, so that is called what?
Buffalo, huh?
Buffalo hump. Have you seen buffalo? Okay.
I feel like there's animals with bigger humps than buffaloes, though. Like buffaloes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why does the fat accumulate there, like on the back of the neck and the face? Why not other places?
Those are the locations where the fat abnormal accumulation occurs in certain areas of the body. Those are called abnormal distribution of fat. Why in those certain areas? Not sure. Okay, but it's abnormal accumulation of fat. It's not normal. Abnormal distribution. For example, in Cushing syndrome, at the same time, fat accumulates in certain areas, but upper and lower extremities, that means the limbs, get skinny, thin. Okay, so the fat tends to accumulate in certain areas, but from other areas get removed. That is another sign. Skinny limbs, or the limbs, yeah, you can say skinny. Is 2N?
Yes.
Okay. Skinny limbs or extremities. Another is acne. Mental disorder. So these are common, more common symptoms of Cushing syndrome. Obesity. In the trunk part of the body, as I have mentioned, and back of the body, a lot of fat accumulates. So obesity. So write down, these are the signs and symptoms of Cushing's syndrome. Now, if the secretion of adrenal cortex is less for a long time, that will cause Addison's disease. What are the symptoms? One is called hyperpigmentation. That means the skin will get a lot of pigments. One condition of hyperpigmentation is called bronze skin. The color of the skin will change. Another is weight loss. Orthostatic hypotension. Hypotension. That means the blood pressure will drop suddenly when you change your body position, like you are lying down. Okay, if you stand up or from sitting to standing, the blood pressure suddenly, what happens? Drops. Okay, that's called postural hypotension or orthostatic hypotension. Okay, so that happens. Hypoglycemia, opposite of this. Hypoglycemia. Fatigue. Okay, so these are another one, write it down, that is abdominal pain and cramp. That happens very commonly. Abdominal pain or disorder or cramp. Okay, so these are common in Addison's disease. Another term you will hear, these are the signs and symptoms of Addison's disease. Another term you will hear, that is called Addison's crisis. Crisis is acute emergency that arises from Addison's disease. If someone has Addison's disease and that patient is not treated, okay, if it stays for a long time without treatment, that can cause Addison's crisis. Sudden emergency, the blood pressure will drop suddenly, okay, and person will go to coma, kidney failure, those serious emergency, conditions will appear. So that's why it is called crisis. So now we'll talk about the gonads. Yes.
So what makes one a syndrome and one a disease? Like, is there a reason?
Syndrome, usually the term syndrome we use if the symptoms are many different types, wide varieties of symptoms, okay? And disease specifically cause certain problems, okay? So syndrome, it's, many symptoms and some of them are unknown. We don't know, okay, why that is happening. So that's why we term that as syndrome. Make sense? Like, have you heard phantom limb syndrome? We phantom pain, and cramping, spasm, the person feels that he has that limb, right? So hallucination, all those things happen. And different patient, different things happen. Make sense? And the cause is mostly unknown. That's why we term that as syndrome. Okay? Okay. Now, the gonads. Gonads, we know, are testes and ovaries. And gonads do two things. Male gonads are testes, female gonads are ovaries. And gonads do two things, we know that. The main function is production of sperm and ova. Testes produce sperm and ovaries produce what? Ova. And production of sperm and ova is reproductive function, right? Not endocrine. It's not hormone. It's sex cells, right? Sex cells for fertilization, reproduction. But also gonads are considered as endocrine gland because they also have endocrine function. That means they produce hormones. Endocrine functions and produce sex hormones. Sex hormones are important hormones because sex hormones do what? Number one, growth and maturation of reproductive organs. Reproductive organs. Number two, sex hormones are responsible for secondary sex characteristics. And number three, sexual behavior, desire, drive, all those things are controlled by sex hormones. And also This is also very important. Cycles, control the cycles like menstrual cycle, ovarian cycle, ovulation, and pregnancy. All these are controlled by sex hormones. These are in female body. Okay, so what are the secondary sex characteristics? These are the characteristics given by the sex hormones. By looking at those features, you can separate a male and a female from outside. That's secondary sex characteristics. Make sense? Now you tell me. Sex hormone gives those features. By looking at those, you can separate what? Male and female from outside, right? So now you tell me, what are the male secondary sex characteristics?
But,
What? How you can separate a male from a female?
oh, that penis and testes?
Yes, the reproductive organs, okay? Those are